Welcome all. Welcome to this webinar from Linda Lee of the Wharton School and myself, Dan Hassan of Feedback Fruits. The title of our talk today is Engagement That Lasts, Best Strategies for Inclusive Course Design. So first, why are we here? Well, we believe it's no exaggeration to say there's a crisis in education right now, specifically concerning engagement and inclusivity. This session will explore what it is and what we can do about it. And after describing some probably familiar themes and scenarios, we'll offer our proposal for a solution. And to show how the dream of inclusive, engaging education is already being made a reality, Linda will share her reflection and experience with inclusive engagement in her Leadership 101 undergraduate course at Wharton. We encourage you to post your questions and thoughts in the chat or comments, and Monica, our event coordinator, will be moderating the chat and answering some questions, and we'll have time at the end of the session to address some of those together. Let's get into it. It's well known that the pandemic has amplified pre-existing problems with our mainstream educational practices. And unfortunately, these problems compound and grow into bigger problems. The first part is uncertainty. Having to adapt course modalities from fully online, blended, or hybrid teaching, sometimes multiple times within the same semester, has an obvious negative impact on the structure and consistency of teaching and learning. This feeds into the unpredictability, stifling growth and progress. Any number of things can happen to disrupt students' abilities to follow courses on schedule. In one of the most common examples, a poor internet connection at home can result in missed lectures, homework, and even exams. The frustration for faculty and stress for students is that this is unpredictable. Even in major cities, a stable connection isn't a guarantee, and this is more than an inconvenience. It's a concern that eats at the limited course time available and erodes the ability to concentrate on course material, breeding anxiety for students and teachers. Another dimension of this uncertainty is the lack of visibility. You don't see students, they don't see each other, and especially in group assignments, it can be impossible to gauge the dynamic. How can you tell where you are in the learning trajectory, let alone give the personal guidance to each student and have meaningful interactions? This uncertainty has led to a lack of support for students and faculties. These forced adaptations we've had to make, along with the practical limitations, mean that everyone's well-being is at risk. Access to on-campus study rooms, libraries, and cafes remains limited, and working or studying from home situations are, as we're well aware, they're less than ideal. There's lack of space, equipment, there's distractions, domestic commitments, and motivational issues arising from the isolation, to name just a few. This lack of support, in turn, leads to a corrosion of the learning community. This is linked to visibility. Whether it's a weekly lecture, breakout rooms, or class discussion, you might get, depending on the class size, no more than a few seconds to check in with each student and group. This makes accounting for the different approaches and paces with which students use for any given assignment yet another challenge. And on personalization, when groups learn together in class, learners build knowledge and skills together with the benefit of direct guidance from an expert or coach. This is limited or missing from much online education. To be clear, individual learning is also a crucial part of any course, but circumstances are not what they've been. Isolation and exclusion of students is another part of this problem. In short, the ideal conditions are missing for concentrating on a reading or completing an assignment in the same way as has been necessary for the entire past of higher education. We're not trying to design education only to cater to the most well-off, privileged, or luckiest students, but for everyone. Traditional one-size-fits-all educational models applied in modern circumstances are in danger of amplifying the divisions between high and low performers, based on things like ability to participate in online discussions or raise one's hand in a Zoom class. We went to school not just to learn in class, but to learn social skills. It's essential we understand the power of community to building sustainable pedagogical practices. And all in all, this lack of contact, community, visibility, and personalization can make it difficult to communicate with students and difficult for them to communicate with each other. So essential lifelong skills like collaboration, critical thinking and discussion, giving and receiving feedback on work, growth and competencies, and even literature or reading comprehension, these can all suffer, diminishing the university experience. what we call the crisis of inclusive engagement. Now, in this field, it's our duty to achieve the education that students and faculties deserve. That means not just our systems and structures, which enable robust pedagogical practices, but everything, demanding proper training, attitudes, and of course, effort of everyone involved. Excuse me. Firstly, I want to share some key themes of our future vision, and then we'll make those concrete with the Feedback Fruits learning journey. We'll share about increasing visibility and transparency, seeing what students are doing, how they're doing it, and how they're experiencing it. Facilitating formative and programmatic assessments, tracking and nurturing the development of skills and knowledge throughout the program. Driving meaningful, effective peer learning, whether feedback, group projects, or anything requiring collaboration, and other lifelong skills, or call them career readiness skills, most of which rely on critical and communicative competencies. And technology. I always like to say Feedback Fruits is a tech company that doesn't think technology is the answer to the educational crisis. Pedagogy is. Pedagogy first. And where online tools can support those proper pedagogical practices, we end up at a pedagogy of care, as it's been called. A system which makes intrinsic, transparent, supporting systems to well-being. Now let's see what that looks like. If you already know about Feedback Fruits, these icons will probably be familiar to you. And if not, each of these 11 tools was co-created with institutions to accommodate a particular pedagogy and support teachers to be able to deliver it. Essentially, we're going to look at things from a flipped classroom perspective. What activities, assignments, and preparations can be made outside of class, asynchronously, to foster the most effective and meaningful experience during class time, or synchronously. This graphic will show in 11 steps how the journey from the start to finish of a course can be supported by Feedback Fruits' pedagogical tool suite. Your courses may use one, many, or even all of these activities or tools, or if you're designing something totally different, why not share in the chat? To get started, we talk about activating students before class. Preparation is half the job, and when students come to class having read the material, it makes building on that material easier, if not possible. But it's never as simple as telling learners to read chapters 1 to 4 or watch the pre-recorded lecture. And that's something we usually only find out when it's class time and we ask, how did we find the week's readings? Activate students with interactive study material, enable for them comments and queries, embed questions of your own into the documents or videos or podcasts, and turn that plain content into a space for dialogue. All the while, follow their progress and prepare for a deeper discussion when it comes to class time. Or maybe you can skip right to the next topic. So in class, you now have your activated students and a chance to address things that came up during the readings. Using the quiz tool, you can give students a chance to consolidate their knowledge, after which those gaps can be effectively detected and addressed. Let's say that after these literature or readings, after in-class explanations and a quiz, your students need to go on to write a paper. That could be a group project, an individual writing assignment, or a thesis. Imagine this class has 500 students and only a handful of staff. Can you give personal, actionable feedback to every student on their writing skills? No, at least not by yourself. But automated feedback is a tool which lets AI generate instant, actionable feedback suggestions on students' written work based on criteria you set yourself, granting for them autonomy, guidance, and support that they urgently need to take responsibility for their own learning. After iterating on the work themselves, students could then peer review each other's work according to rubrics or scales you determine. Encourage a dialogue about the content, about the work, and about the learning journey. Then, in class, give time for reflection on the progress so far, finding time to have open, transparent discussions about those topics and issues dealt with the guidance of the coach or expert is an invaluable moment to check in with students before the final stretch. And whether group or individual work, the final submission can be handed in with assignment review, allowing for teacher feedback on whichever criteria you chose. Lastly, a final group member evaluation can allow students to evaluate themselves and each other on the process of that group work, consolidating that collaborative experience. All the while, throughout each of these activities, you can maintain visibility on the progress and performance of each student and each group, save time on setup with reusable and shareable courses and templates, and give all students an activating, engaging, meaningful learning experience, the one they deserve. This is how we imagine the learning journey with Feedback Fruits. And now I'll pass over to Linda Lee to share her concrete case of how this dream can be realized. Linda, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dan. Okay. So I'm really pleased to be here today to be able to share some of our experiences with one of our courses that has been designed intentionally for inclusive teaching from start to finish. Thank you so much, Dan and Monica and Helena and others at Feedback Fruits for giving me this opportunity to participate today. I'm really happy to be here. So I'll start by telling you just a little bit about myself. My name is Linda Lee. I'm the Director of Instructional Design on the courseware team at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. I'm also a part-time lecturer at Penn. I teach in the School of Arts and Sciences in the School of Professional and Liberal Studies, as I teach folklore courses, both face-to-face courses and online courses. Prior to joining Wharton, I taught a variety of subjects: writing, humanities, literature, and folklore at a wide range of schools in the Philadelphia area. So I have a lot of experience in the classroom before I came to Wharton. I joined Wharton almost 7 years ago. I was the first instructional designer that Wharton hired. And now I lead a small team of instructional designers that's part of the courseware team. The courseware team administers and supports Canvas and related platforms for Wharton. When I joined Wharton, our faculty didn't really know what instructional design was. 7 years ago, it was a new area for our faculty. But during that time, they've come to understand the value that instructional design expertise can bring to improve their classes. And the class that I'm going to talk to you about today is one example where we've played a really significant role in that. So to tell you just a little bit about Wharton, if you're familiar with Wharton, probably what you know about Wharton is its flagship MBA program. The Wharton overall, however, has 4 degree programs. The MBA program is just one. We have about 5,000 students altogether. Just over 2,600 of them are undergrads. Just about 1,800 are MBA students in our flagship MBA program. We have about 460 or so executive MBA students in our Wharton Executive MBA program. There are cohorts both on the East Coast and West Coast for that. And then we also have about 200 PhD students. Each semester, though, we teach far more than just these 5,000 students. We teach about 7,000 students. So we've got about 2,000 students from elsewhere at the University of Pennsylvania who register and take Wharton courses. When we think about the population of students coming into Wharton, there's a real wide range of students here. One of the things that's really exciting for Wharton's MBA program is that this year, for the first time, women make up more than half of the incoming class, of the first year class of our MBA students. But when you look at the demographics overall, one of the things that I hope you notice immediately is that there's a wide range of diversity among the students at Wharton. Students of color, international students, first year students, women represent increasing populations across all of our degree programs. So to move away from Wharton to what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what inclusive course design is. And I'm going to talk about some considerations for inclusive course design as you think about using inclusive course design in your courses. And then I'm going to focus in on a case study. And as Dan said, this is the course that I'm going to focus on is Wharton 101. Sometimes we call it Introduction to Wharton, but I'll tell you more about that class in just a couple minutes. So what is inclusive course design? Now, inclusive course design is sometimes used interchangeably with the term universal design for learning, or UDL. But these concepts are not exactly the same. And I want to start by just sort of positioning them in contrast to one another. UDL is a concept that emerged from architecture, from the architectural concept of universal design. And what universal design is intended to do is to remove barriers for access. So one of the most common examples of universal design in architecture is sidewalk cutouts. So the ramps onto sidewalks that allow people with strollers or people who are using assistive devices to be able to easily get onto sidewalks. That's one of the most common examples that's given for an example of universal design. When we take that idea and apply it to course design, what happens with universal design for learning is that it is designed to provide the greatest degree of access and the most usability for the most people. At the end of the day, though, it is a single design that's intended to work for everyone, or almost everyone. It's a single design that it's a concept that emerged from architecture, which is a static design concept. And so it really prioritizes a single design that emphasizes a single pathway. Now, I don't say this to diss universal design for learning. We use universal design for learning in the courses that we design all of the time. So it's something that we're really, that is really important. But as we think about inclusive course design takes that concept and moves it really into the digital age. So inclusive course design emerged from a digital rather than a built environment. And one of the markers of a digital environment is its adaptability, its changeability. It's not, things in a digital environment are not always in a fixed state. Inclusive course design welcomes the full range of human diversity and experience, ideally without the need for accommodation. So when we think about students who have students with disabilities who may have an accommodation to be granted access to transcripts, for instance, or have some other classroom accommodation, that accommodation model for accessibility is really turned on its head with inclusive course design. The idea behind inclusive course design is to provide access to a course to everyone without needing to make those accommodations on an individual basis. Now, obviously, there may still be edge cases that need to be designed for, but in general, inclusive course design really tries to be open and welcoming regardless of where people are. It's an approach to course design that addresses the complex intersectional needs that our students today have, many of which Dan noted earlier, that may be due to financial circumstances, socioeconomic circumstances, access to technology, a wide range of life circumstances that our students bring to the class. And so inclusive course design, essentially building accommodations into the course itself, it extends what we think of as accommodations to all learners. And it provides a flexible, iterative design for a course. So we can think of a summary of what inclusive course design is. It's a course design that intentionally cultivates a more equitable and inclusive learning experience for everyone. Why does this matter? Now, I know that we likely have people here from not just the United States today, but the stats that I have most easily accessible to me are from the United States. And in the US, 1 in 4 adults live with a disability. Many of the disabilities that our students are dealing with are not visible, and many students who need accommodations will not have done the paperwork to get those accommodations. First generation students, which make up more than 10% of the Wharton undergraduate student body, frequently come to our universities not as prepared as many of their peers to be able to navigate university settings. And then, as Dan said, many of our students have a wide range of personal, financial, other professional obligations, caregiving obligations that exist outside of class that are competing for their time and attention in really meaningful and significant ways. And then, of course, broadband and technology access is far from equitable across everyone. So inclusive design takes these factors into consideration and tries to design around that. Inclusive design matters because these factors all are barriers to student learning. And what inclusive design does is it intentionally tries to make it easier, not harder, for learners to participate. So some considerations for inclusive course design. Now, if you look at guidelines for inclusive course design or inclusive course design checklists, they'll frequently give you a great list of items to check off to start to make your course inclusive. It frequently emphasizes things like making your class a welcoming place, giving students an opportunity to introduce themselves, being clear in instructions. I want to take a slightly different approach to think about some of the principles for inclusive design and give you a framework to think about how to design a course where inclusivity is built from the ground up, not just in course instructions or an introductory assignment, but suffused throughout all aspects of course design. So instructional designers and educators are really well positioned to either influence or establish course design that will foster inclusivity and reduce barriers for participation. And there are 4 areas that I want to talk about today: course policies, course materials, activities and assessments, and technology use. And I'm going to briefly talk about each of these, and then I'm going to talk about how each of these areas play out in a course at Wharton. So course policies, you want to think about how to set expectations and provide support for people. And I'm not going to discuss every item that's on each of these lists. You'll have access to the slide deck later if you want to look at these. But in general, you want to think about course policies that begin with flexibility and that have flexibility suffused in all of the places where it's possible, whether that's flexibility in terms of allowing students to use technology in the class, whether that's flexibility in terms of deadlines, whether that's flexibility in terms of reconsidering draconian attendance or participation policies and what those things mean. Providing flexibility will increase the chances that students are going to succeed. And then on the flip side, recognizing that learning is a difficult process and emphasizing the kinds of circumstances that can help to lead to success. So emphasizing growth mindset and struggle as a normalized part of the learning experience. Letting students know that it's okay to get things wrong and building those learning activities in ways that do not punish students for not already knowing how to do the thing is really important. Course materials. Now, course materials are one of the places where students, especially economically challenged students, can really struggle. The cost of textbooks, the cost of course readings are skyrocketing. And we absolutely expect our students to have the technology that they need in order to make the class happen. So that means that they already coming into school, they need to have a computer, they need to have access to the internet. There are a lot of things that they have to have in place. And when we build in expensive course materials on top of that, that becomes an added burden that can prevent students from being able to successfully complete their work. So providing course materials at low or ideally no cost is really important. So using electronic course reserves or instructor generated materials, making those materials accessible to students through the LMS that you're using is also very, very important. Choosing course materials that will be culturally relevant to your students, and also making that content available to students wherever they are. So making sure that content is available to students in an asynchronous way is extremely important. Activities and assessments. So if at all possible, offering students a choice in the assessments that they do, some kind of choice, helps them to be more engaged. Incorporating reflection in learning is also an important aspect of consolidating students' knowledge about their learning experience. At the Wharton School, we're a business school, group work is really important in our learning experiences. So planning group work out thoughtfully and how those groups get formed is also important to having an inclusive course. If you have students who are always and only forming their own groups, then you have students who are cliques of students. You may end up with cliques of students who are working together and other students who are experiencing exclusion because they don't have a ready-made group to work with. So thinking about how to organize groups to promote student belonging and promote student sense of ownership of and participation in that class is also important. And then planning in regular opportunities for feedback. And when I talk about Wharton 1, I'll talk about some of the opportunities for feedback and where some of the feedback fruits tools come into play there. And technology use. Technology use, I'm an educational technology professional, so it might sound a little heretical for me to say that more technology is not always the answer, but more technology is not always the answer. When you choose technology to use, be deliberate in your choices. Use technology deliberately but judiciously. So choose the technologies that will give you the most benefit for what you're asking of students. Every time you ask students to learn a new tool, that is additional cognitive overload for them. So be thoughtful and selective about what you choose. And consider also your classroom technology use policies. These can have a tremendous effect on how students participate in class, especially at a point in time when we're dealing with students many of whom have spent much of the last 2 years participating in classes remotely. And so if you're having a classroom technology policy that bans technology from the classroom, where students have spent the last 2 years taking notes in their word processor of choice or their note-taking application of choice, and now you expect them to do that with pen and paper, that is not setting students up for success. So think about technology use at all levels, what you're choosing to use with your class and what you're expecting your students to do while they're in class. And then bear in mind that learning and teaching are iterative. It's not, while a particular class might be one and done in that students take the class and you give them grades and then they're gone, chances are excellent that you're going to be teaching this class again. So reflect on course successes and failures, iterate and improve for future classes, get feedback from students, from your peers about how classes go, and strategically build that into your planning for next time. And you'll hear a little bit about how we do that in Wharton 101, which is what I'm going to turn my attention to now. So Wharton 101 fits in, is part of the Wharton undergraduate curriculum. It fits into, it's the first year course. It's a gateway course that's taken by all Wharton undergrads. It's the core element and the first part of their leadership journey. It is a gateway course. It is not a leader course. That is, it is a course that brings people into the fold and teaches them about Wharton, teaches them about business careers. It was launched as part of a revised Wharton undergraduate curriculum in 2017. And I've been working closely with the faculty who teach this course since the planning for this started in 2016. It is a half-credit pass-fail course that is required of all incoming Wharton undergraduates and transfer students. In total, there are about 650 or 660 students who take it every fall across 12 sections. So it's a large enrollment course that affects all of our students. It's team taught by Anne Greenhall and Scott Romika, and also by our Vice Dean for Wharton Undergraduate Division, who is currently Diana Robertson. The teaching team also includes 36 TAs, students who previously were successful in this course. And each TA works with 2 groups of students in 2 different sections. So one group in 2 different sections, rather, with 2 groups of a maximum of 10 students in each group. This course is designed for inclusion and success. The course has a combination of weekly asynchronous lectures and synchronous in-person or hybrid recitation meetings. Now, the asynchronous lectures, they cover the business pathways, which are lectures covering introducing students to Wharton's 10 different departments. Before the pandemic, these lectures took place in person in a large classroom with about 200 to 250 students in it. Once the pandemic hit, though, this part of the course moved to an asynchronous modality. And that's a modality that the teaching team has decided to stick to. It's worked much better as an asynchronous element to the course. And that is a change from the pandemic that will stick. During weekly in-class sessions, students focus on their personal and leadership development and also on their group and collaboration work. So students over the course of the semester work both individually on their personal development and in groups on a semester-long project where they're working with an outside organization. In order to pass this class, students have to complete all coursework. One of the questions that students sometimes ask is, how much can I miss and still pass? And the answer is none. They have to complete everything. And so to allow students to be able to complete everything, that fact drove a lot of the course design. The course was designed at every stage to allow students the opportunity to make up or redo work that they had missed. Over the course of the semester, there are frequent low-stakes assignments that are graded primarily on completion. And if students do not do that in an acceptable quality, they'll have the opportunity to resubmit that. Throughout the semester, they receive feedback from faculty, from their TAs and their peers, and that is an essential part of the course. And the content of the course includes growth mindset and personal development, includes developing students' skills for working collaboratively within a team and also developing their leadership skills. So that's a little bit about the class. As I said earlier, the course was designed in close collaboration with Wharton's instructional designers. Attendance is required, but students have the opportunity to make up any classes that they missed, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. Starting this past year, the course meets in a SAIL classroom, that is a structured, active, in-class learning classroom that allows students, that has movable tables and other technology that allows students to work really closely in their groups as they do throughout their in-person sessions. And with this year, although Penn and Wharton returned to in-person classes this fall, many students still needed the ability to connect to class, to participate in class remotely. So before the semester started, during the summer, as soon as Penn's campus reopened, I met with the teaching team in the SAIL class, in one of the new SAIL's classrooms. It was in this new building. I'm showing you a picture of what the atrium of the building looks like here, to work out the details of what that hybrid experience would look like for students, how students would join class, how they would participate in their groups when they join class remotely, and what that would look like. So because students have to do everything, all of their learning activities have deadlines, but they do have the ability to make up missed work. So the due dates in the LMS are designed to help keep students on track, but they are allowed to make late submissions or makeup opportunities are built in. So for one example, the asynchronous lectures, which we do using the Feedback Fruits interactive video tool, those lectures are kept open throughout the semester, and in fact from the fall are indeed still open because there are a few students who are still trying to finish some lingering assignments from the fall semester. So those are kept open to allow anyone who has not completed the work to do so. And then the synchronous class sessions have makeup assignments built in that are automatically made available to students if they get a 0 on attendance for that class session. So here you can see on in this module from the Canvas site, that there is an item that's locked. If a student earns a 0, the makeup assignment will automatically become unlocked using Canvas's mastery paths to help facilitate that. The course materials for this class are all free to students. They are provided to students using electronic course reserves. Everything is provided through the LMS. All class meetings are recorded, and those recordings are made available to all students. All of the asynchronous videos and the classroom lecture capture videos are captioned, and those are made available to students. And then students are also provided with models for the various tasks that they're expected to do in their group work with the outside organization that they're working with. So the course materials at every level are designed for inclusivity and student success. Their activities and assessments, as I said, group work is key to this course. The groups are planned prior to the start of the semester, and the groups are designed for diversity so that students are working in groups with people who are from other parts of the country or other parts of the world than them, students who have other areas of expertise. The teaching team spends a lot of time in advance creating these learning teams that emphasize diversity. And then group work is present in every class, and we've found ways to make that remote participation possible. We use several of the Feedback Fruits tools to allow students the opportunity to give feedback to each other about how they're performing as individuals within a group and how their group is performing overall. And we use Feedback Fruits group member evaluation for that. That's not the only feedback opportunity they have. They also get feedback from the faculty who are teaching their classes and the TAs that they work closely with. So we have opportunities for feedback built in at every stage. We use the group member evaluation tool that is configured to work with the Canvas groups. Students provide individual feedback, and they're given specific guidance about what their feedback should look like. And we also use the self-assessment option to allow students to reflect on their own participation in the class as an emerging leader and as a group member. After they complete the group member evaluation, they're also asked to reflect upon the feedback that they received. One of the things that we've observed, though, is that fewer students complete this part of it. And one of the things that, as we look ahead to fall 2022, is we're looking at ways to improve student participation in this part of it. So the technology that the last thing that I want to talk about is technology use. We select technologies that can help to support the scale of this class, which includes Canvas, which is the LMS that we use at Penn, Zoom, which is what we use for video conferencing. Panopto is our video management platform. We also use Feedback Fruits and course reserves. And all of this helps to deliver the course and all of the learning activities in an inclusive way at scale. As I said, these classes are held in our structured active in-class learning classrooms to facilitate group collaboration and group learning and group work. All of the grades and the feedback are communicated to students through our LMS as a way to make sure that there's transparency for students about how they're doing and where they're doing in class. And students are allowed to use devices in class in whatever way will best help to support their learning. And we match activity and assessment settings with the course policies. So I saw a question come up in chat about why are there deadlines if you let students do work late? And the deadlines are there really to help keep students stay on track, to give them targets for when they're supposed to do something, to give a date by which students are supposed to complete the work, and then those grades will get released to them. If they miss that and they get a 0, they still need to make that work up. So the deadlines are there to help keep them on track. But we match the settings that we use for activities, for learning activities at each stage with our overall course policies and make sure that those are all aligned, which is one of the points that I want to make here, that as you're using technology, you want to use it in a way that supports your overall goals. And so the results is that this is a significant learning experience that helps to foster student success. And students are given every opportunity to pass this class. And the end result is that very, 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 very few students fail. I think last year, no one failed. We're still working on this year, so we can check back in a few months and I'll let you know how the fall semester ends up shaking out. And then as we look ahead to fall, as I said, we recognize that this is an iterative process. And we each year we look to see where are the places where students struggled, where are the places where things didn't go exactly as we hoped, and we look for opportunities for improvement there. And thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you so much, Linda, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dan. And I see that we have a lot of questions, so I'm sure that this is going to make for a very exciting discussion. First of all, we have a question about what should we do if we have more questions that we might not be able to address here. So as you can see on the screen, you can feel free to message me at monica@feedbackfruits.com. Someone was also asking if Linda's contact information will be provided, but if you also have a question, it can go through me as well. And feel free to contact me at this email address, and we'll be able to answer all of the remaining questions that might not be available here. So I will read aloud the questions that we had not answered in the chat, and Linda or Dan could answer them if that is possible. So for the first question was from Caroline. And the question is to Dan, asking what age range are the supporting research assumptions based on? So if I may begin, the framework that Dan spoke of was related to higher education pedagogy, but I'm sure that Dan can also provide a more comprehensive answer.
Indeed, you've got the basics, Monica. We're talking about higher education here, which covers everything from adult learners who may be senior, right down to undergraduates who may be fresh out of college. So, of course, differences exist between many skills, backgrounds, abilities of those people. But this learning journey that we shared is based on pedagogical tools which are available for everyone to use. Everyone in higher education in this example.
All right, thanks, Dan. So the next question was asked during Linda's presentation, but I assume that it can also be to Dan. Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, but Robin asked if we had any references for this information, or is it based on our own experience? Yeah, he said that this is great information, but he would like some background resources.
That was a question to us at Feedback Fruits?
This was voiced during Linda's presentation, okay.
But so Robin, Dan, I'll be happy to field that question. So the way that I've grouped this information about inclusive course design is based on my own experience, but it's in line with inclusive course design. It is similar to, although not exactly the same as, other guidelines and suggestions that you'll see for inclusive course design practices from teaching and learning sites and other experts in inclusive course design. So it's a combination. I would be happy to pull together some sources and pass them along to Monica, who could share them with people who are registered for this webinar, if that would be of interest to people. I
right,
completely understand why you might need some background references to sell your admin on making some changes, especially at our institution. One of the things that, so I know you'll hear me talk really good game about not having devices in class, but our core MBA program has a no device in the classroom policy, and it is a fight that I work with on faculty on a one-to-one basis. So a lot of these issues really can be challenging for administration to take seriously, and to have changes to courses made to accommodate for. So I understand that, and it is a big burden to put on a teaching team to expect maximum flexibility on their part to lead to student success. And if you're in an institution, especially if you're in an institution that is relying on contingent faculty members to teach your classes, it may not be realistic to expect them to bear the additional burden of being that flexible with students. So I'll be happy to share what information and resources I can, but I do recognize that not every institution is the same, and that there are inequities at every level in higher education.
All right, thank you so much, Linda. So let me just move on to a couple of quicker questions, and then we can move on to two more elaborate questions. So Robin asked, how large is the team that worked on designing this course? This is a question to you, Linda.
So I'll be frank. When we first started working on this course, I worked with Anne Greenhall on the precursor to this course, which was Management 100. That was basically the first project that was handed to me when I started at the beginning of August in 2015. And so I'd worked closely with Anne on the precursor, setting up the precursor to this course. And 2 years later, or a year and a half later, when the planning for Wharton 101 started, I worked closely with her. At that point in time, I was the only instructional designer on the team. It was a big lift for me to work on. As this course moved to a remote format in fall of 2020, we needed more than, on the Wharton computing side, we needed more than just me to help with that. We suddenly had asynchronous videos that needed to look more polished than just a Zoom recording. And so we got assistance from our digital services team, our video production team, to do a little bit of post-production work to make those videos a little bit better. But it was still a pretty big lift for me. We've just added another member of my team, and one of the things that is going to happen this year is there'll be another person on the instructional design side who will also be working to support this. But it is I'll be frank, this was one of my major projects for many, many years in a row, and it was a substantial amount of work for me, which is maybe not the answer you wanted to hear.
We can imagine, but I'm glad to hear it worked out. So for the next very interesting question from Lindsay, wondering if included in this case study, there is information regarding stipends or economic impact that making these changes to the overall design of the courses has caused. And also a follow-up question, are there suggestions for organizations or systems that have policies in place that may generate roadblocks to implementation? So yeah.
I'm not sure I caught all of the aspects of that question. Monica, could you?
Yeah, absolutely. I will repost it so you can have a look.
That would be helpful.
Related to your previous question, and maybe an easier one to answer, quicker one to answer would be about the size of your team, asked by Robin B.
Wharton answered. Yeah, we
So
we already had a bit of a conversation about that, but yeah.
to answer Lindsay's question, it depends on who you're talking about the stipends being made to. The first year or two that the course was offered, we have some content specialists on our team who work with securing copyright clearances for business cases and other readings that are really commonly used in business education. Some of which can be included in electronic course reserves, many of which cannot be. And because reasons, we were able to get the company that we work with to provide a couple of readings without cost to our students. But that just happened for the first couple of years. After that, the teaching team, the core teaching team, were really adamant with the faculty who were teaching the weekly business pathways parts of the course, that they had to use materials that were free for students. So they stopped being able to use cases that had a cost associated with it. So in this sense, there wasn't really a stipend. Students were never asked to pay anything out of pocket. And we were really cognizant of the fact that there wasn't, and we've been looking for a way to see if the undergraduate division can sort of bear the costs, any costs associated with this, but we haven't been able to work those details out. So up until this point in time, we've really been emphasizing using either materials that faculty have developed or materials that are accessible through our library's electronic reserve materials. And like that, in the last couple of years, that's been a hard line in the sand that the teaching team has been able to, that the core teaching team has been able to enforce for those who are doing the weekly lectures. Other course materials are other ones that are freely available, like TED Talks, podcasts, things like that. And that's been overall not a difficult sell for our faculty. There were a couple of readings that they had to, where we really had to get them to stop using, so there wasn't a need for a stipend in that sense. Suggestion, and then your second question, are there suggestions for organizations or systems that have policies in place or that may generate roadblocks to implementation? I think it depends on exactly what you're asking about there. I'm not sure how to answer that question, because if you're asking about suggestions for organizations that may have policies that are in conflict with some of what I've suggested, what I would say is start where you can. Start making improvements in the places where you can make improvements. Like, we've gone whole hog in trying to make this course as accessible as possible. But even if you can only start with one or two things, even if you can start with reducing the cost of course materials or being more flexible about some aspects of class where it's possible, those small changes will make a difference. And once you start to see benefits, whatever that looks like, whether that's improved student evaluations, whether that's improved course completion, whether that's fewer students who are failing, whatever those metrics look like based on what changes you're able to introduce initially, you can hopefully use that as part of a justification for making broader changes. Oh, so Lindsay clarified, saying she was thinking more of salary or stipend offered for course creation. In this case, it was the faculty who are working on it. This was part of their job, and I actually don't know if they had a salary or a stipend that was for course creation for this. That was not a question I asked. I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for you there. I know that I've gotten salaries, I've gotten stipends for some course development, but I don't know what the situation was this time.
Thank you.
That's a really great question.
That's true. I think, yeah, maybe in the future we can get an answer. So we have 5 minutes left, and we have a couple of questions regarding how some more tips on how to design an inclusive course and some more resources. So Dan, would you mind showing the resources that we've compiled on our next slide? And also, as we have discussed, our newest ebook on quality online teaching and learning will be provided in the chat, so you can follow this link, but we will also send it via an email with the recording of the session and the slides. And also in this ebook, you will be able to find the learning journey that Dan showed towards the beginning of the presentation, and some more tips on how to design an inclusive course. But here are the resources that you may be able to use. So our new ebook will be posted in the chat. And as for the next question, we also have a question about what was the average number of students that actually delivered the work after the deadline. That is the question to Linda as well.
So I'll be frank, it depends on the point in time that we're talking about. In fall of 2020, there was significantly larger number of students who were turning work in late. Like it was and I know that that semester was not, our experience was not dissimilar. Like it was something that I've heard from colleagues elsewhere as a common issue that they were seeing. Generally, in terms of the number of students who would miss a class out of the 650 or so students who would miss an in-class session and need to make up one, that would be about somewhere between 6 and 12 for any given class, students who were absent who needed to make that up. And about the same number, maybe 10 or 12, 10 to 15 who would fail to turn in an assignment, who then, and this is across the 650. This is not on a per section basis. So Anne Greenhall, who I worked with really closely, is the person who follows up with students to make sure that they get late work turned in.
Thank you so much, Linda. And I think this also answers Laura's question that if this sets students up for thinking that everyone will be this flexible if teachers.
One, I wish everyone would be this flexible. I recognize that not every class is the same, not every faculty member is the same, and it is this extreme example of flexibility for students is not always practical. There are different ways of thinking about incorporating flexibility into your class. I'm happy to talk offline about how I do that in my introduction to folklore class during the summer, for instance. But so there are different ways of incorporating flexibility and being flexible where you can. In my experience at Penn and at Wharton, students don't necessarily assume that every faculty member will be this way, because the University of Pennsylvania places a high value on academic freedom, and there's an expectation that faculty will teach courses in ways that are appropriate and consistent with their fields and their areas of expertise. So there is not so students might wish for that, but they don't expect that. Other institutions that have more consistency from one course to another might experience that expectation more significantly than we do.
Thank you. All right, and I think we have answered the time for just one last question. This might be for you both, Linda and Dan. Caroline asks, can you share any insights on what factors contribute to rich and constructive feedback or discourages these?
I just want to immediately jump in and say Feedback Fruit's website is chock full of resources and guides on those sorts of things, how to foster feedback. But before I babble on, I'll pass on to Linda to see if she's got any tips.
So in this case, in the feedback, the instructions that students are given for the kind of feedback that they should give each other, they're encouraged to give specific examples. In specific examples of what worked well or what could have been improved. The teaching team uses, they do a lot of guidance with students about how to provide that feedback. And the feedback, so students receive the feedback through Feedback Fruits, but they also have an opportunity to talk with their TA on a one-on-one basis and together as a group about the feedback that they've received. So the feedback is not given in a vacuum at all. The feedback is contextualized and supported, and students sort of working through that feedback, especially when it's constructive, is also supported in particular through their meetings with their TAs.
Thanks very much, Linda. I think as it's on the hour now, we'd better close things off, unfortunately. Thank you so much for the engagement, these questions and these discussions that arise organically. It's very heartwarming to see, and I hope it's been useful. Monica, have you got any last words before we end the session?
Thank you so much to you, Dan, and to you, Linda, and to everyone who has joined us. I just shared one more resource that everyone regarding the last question might be interested in. It's an ebook on feedback that details the criteria for quality feedback and ways of implementing them. And again, thank you so much for a very engaging presentation and for all of your questions and participation. We're so happy that we've managed to have these conversations with us, and we're looking forward to reconnecting with you in our future events.